and welcome to iCope's online workshop all about understanding and managing sleep problems. My name's Amy. I'm a senior psychological wellbeing practitioner in iCope, and I'm with my colleague Yatunde. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello everyone. My name is Yatunde Onifade, and I'm a psychological wellbeing practitioner here in iCope, working alongside Amy.
So we're just going to start by telling you a little bit about who iCope are, and then we'll go on to tell you a little bit more about this workshop and the things that we're going to be covering. So iCope are a iApt service, so an improving access to psychological therapy service. We're based in Camden and Islington, and we offer support for people with mild to moderate anxiety and depression. We primarily offer cognitive behavioural therapy. So most of the techniques that we're going to be talking about today are all based on cognitive behavioural therapy techniques. We offer online groups and online workshops, as well as one-to-one support as well. And just so you're aware, we're not a crisis service, but we know that thoughts of self-harm or suicide are very common for people experiencing anxiety or depression, or just generally when we're feeling really overwhelmed. So just before all of our workshops, we just like to share this information just so you have it. It might be that it's not relevant to you at the moment, but just so you're aware, there are places that you can go to seek more immediate support if that's something that would be helpful for you. So you could contact your GP, contact the Samaritans, or in Camden, Islington, we also have a crisis team who are a team of mental health professionals. They're available 24 hours a day, and there's a number there that you can call them on at any time. Just to be aware, due to COVID, I guess you might be reading this when this maybe isn't so relevant, but just at the moment, we're not recommending that anybody attend A&E right now, but there is a crisis assessment centre available at St Pancras Hospital. So I'm going to go on to just tell you a little bit more about what we're actually going to be talking about in this workshop today. So we'll be thinking about more about sleep, about what sleep is, learning about the stages of sleep, busting some common myths and facts about sleep, thinking about why we might have sleep problems and why they continue, why they can be really hard to break out of. And then towards the second half of the session, we'll be teaching you some strategies around improving your sleep and helping you to make a plan of how you could implement these changes. So we're going to start by having a think about what we know about sleep, because there's a lot of kind of myths around sleep, and there's lots of things that some people might think are true which actually aren't true. Sometimes that can be unhelpful. So we're going to have a look at each of these statements and just have a think about whether we think they are true or false. So people need a lot less sleep in later life. This is something which I think a lot of people think is true, but actually it's false. So we know that sleep does tend to change as we get older, and often we might need less sleep. I guess older adults might find that they get tired earlier in the afternoon and then they wake up earlier, but it doesn't necessarily mean that older people need to sleep less. The next one here, sleep is pretty much the same all the night through. We know that that one is also false. So we know that sleep really varies and it changes, and we have different stages of sleep throughout the night, and we'll go on to talk a little bit more about that later on in this workshop. The next one says we should try to make up for all of our lost sleep on subsequent nights. I think that there can be a real pressure to do this. If we've had a couple of nights where we haven't slept well, we think we have to catch up on that sleep, but actually this is false, and we can't catch up on that sleep necessarily, but we'll talk a bit more about that. Next one says that dreaming is usually a sign of emotional upset. And again, we know that this one is false. So dreaming is actually something that's really normal and a healthy part of sleep, and we all dream every night, even if we don't remember our dreams. But we do all dream, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's there's a problem or there's some sort of emotional upset for us if we're having dreams. Sleep is important for mental processing. We know that this one is definitely true, that sleep is an important part for our body and our brain to repair itself. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then the last one here, the more sleep you can get, the better you will feel the next day. Again, I think this is one that lots of us think is true, but actually it's false. It's not necessarily about the quantity of sleep that we get, it's about the quality of our sleep. And again, we'll talk a bit more about that as well. And we just got a couple more here. So most adults sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. Again, this is what a lot of people think is true, and this is what media and lots of other things kind of believe is true. But actually, we know that this really varies, and actually most people sleep between 5 to 10 hours. It can really vary. But 7 to 8 is kind of what most people think is recommended for us. But yeah, we know this varies. There is no such thing as deep sleep. It's just a manner of speech. Again, we know that this is false as well. So there is such a stage as deep sleep. And again, we'll be talking about these different stages of sleep a bit later on. Sleep problems usually pass away quite quickly. We know that sleep problems can come and go throughout our lives, and sometimes they don't last a long time, and sometimes they might last a bit longer. But just because we're having a sleep problem at the moment doesn't mean that it's something that's going to last forever. And then the last two here, so most people don't cope very well after a bad night's sleep. Again, this is probably something that lots of us think is true, that we aren't going to cope after a bad night's sleep. But actually, we know that we're very good at still carrying on and still doing really well after a bad night's sleep. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to cope if we haven't been able to sleep very well. And then the final one here, sleeping pills are addictive. Again, this is something that we know is true, that sleeping pills can be addictive. And again, we'll go on to talk a little bit more about sleeping pills as well. So yeah, I hope that this just gives you a little bit of introduction to sleep. I wonder if there's any there that you maybe didn't know about. So we're going to move on to thinking a bit more about what sleep is and how it impacts us. And Yutunde is going to tell us a little bit more about sleeping pills.
Often people think that when they use sleeping pills, that it's a perfect solution to their sleeping difficulties. But we do know that sleeping pills actually do not promote natural sleep, and it is a myth that there is a perfect sleeping pill, because what sleeping pills actually do is that they break that natural rhythm that is associated with good sleeping habits. And the second thing about sleeping pills is that often people only realize that they are addictive when they come off the pills and then begin to experience withdrawal symptoms. And this can lead to rebound insomnia. And it is therefore advised that if you have been on sleeping pills and you want to come off them, that you do so in a slow way, and usually with support from your GP, either to come off the medication altogether or to reduce the amount that you do take. And we will certainly recommend that if you want to find out more about sleeping pills, that you can also visit the Mind website or speak to your GP, like I said earlier. And so the next thing is for us to actually think together about what sleep is. Well, sleep is an important time when both our mind and body is at rest. And there are different types of sleep throughout the night. And we cycle through these ones throughout that period. It includes light sleep, deep sleep, dream sleep, and there are several stages of this sleep throughout the time that we are actually sleeping. And scientists have been able to indicate that we may actually have up to 6 spells of dreams throughout the night. And like Amy said earlier on, during that time, we may also dream. And dreams are a normal part of sleep, regardless of whether we remember them or not. Amy, I'll now pass over to you to talk about sleep cycles.
No problem, that's fine. So, as Yatunde said, we tend to kind of have these different stages of sleep. And something that we wanted to show you was a hypnogram. So a hypnogram is it's our brain activity whilst we're asleep. This is a kind of an image of what our recording of our brain activity looks like. So we can see that at the very beginning, we go down in these steps down, and then we'll have a period of sleep, and then we'll come back up as well. So this initial part at the very beginning is where we'll go into a deeper sleep, and then we'll come in and out of sleep throughout the night. And each of these cycles is roughly about 90 minutes. We'll normally have 4 or 5 of these cycles during the night. So this kind of initial stage is a transition between being awake and being asleep. And in this stage, our muscles might begin to relax, and we're not fully asleep. So we might be able to be woken quite easily if we hear a noise, or if we're startled or something like that happens, then in that initial stage of sleep, we might be able to be woken. And in this second stage of sleep, we enter into a light sleep where our breathing and our heart rate slow. And we normally spend about 50 to 60% of our sleep cycle in this kind of stage of sleep. And then the next stage of sleep is our deep sleep. So this is where our breathing and our heart rate drop to their lowest point. I guess we've got the fifth stage here as well, which is known as rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. So this is a stage where most of our dreams occur, and our eyes might flicker. So that's why it's referred to as rapid eye movement. So whilst we're dreaming, our eyes might move. We use this analogy of it being like a staircase, because we can see that these stages come in steps. It's like a step process. Just going to move us on to have a look at this part as well. So like I said, the brain prioritizes deep restorative sleep at the beginning of the night and the first third of the night. So even if we think to ourselves that we've only slept for a couple of hours or 2 or 3 hours, we know that those initial stages of sleep are where we are getting the most benefits. So that's how we can survive on still sleeping kind of 2 or 3 hours a night. As I mentioned before, at the top of that staircase, that's when we're most likely to wake up, when we're coming out of those cycles. So some people might wake up in the night. That's something that's really common. Some people might remember waking up, and some people maybe don't remember waking up. You probably notice as well here that these 3 cycles, we've got one for a child, one for a young adult, and one for an elderly person. So a child is going into a deeper sleep for longer at the very beginning, whereas compared to like the elderly person, their sleep is more up and down. So it seems like they're waking up more regularly during the night compared to the younger person. Yatunde is going to go on to talk a little bit more about how our sleep might impact on different areas of our life, and particularly when we have poor sleep, how that can be a problem for us.
Thank you very much, Amy. When people have sleeping difficulties, like Amy said, we try and look at that within the framework of cognitive behavioral therapy principles. And what we know is that when people are not sleeping very well, it would usually be accompanied with some thoughts and emotions, physical symptoms, and behaviors. And all of these things kind of reinforce each other in what we call the vicious cycle of insomnia. Because what is happening is that actually, in order to sleep, we need to be in a state of rest rather than in a state of hyper arousal. But when we are struggling to sleep, um, our thoughts might be racing, and then the behaviors that we're engaging in, which is trying to get to sleep, actually, in a sense, heighten that state of arousal, which then makes those physical sensations that we might be having even worse. And then typically we can begin to feel even more frustrated. So that's sort of a quick overview of what the vicious cycle looks like. But I'd like to go on and maybe help us to look at an example. So, so take for instance, I'll call this person Jane. Jane goes to bed at 12 a.m. and at about 1 o'clock, she's saying to herself, oh, she's still awake. And then let's think about the thoughts she's having. She's thinking, I have only 5 hours now before I have to be up. I will never be able to sleep. And those anxious thoughts lead to her feeling hot physically. Her heart might be racing. She might be fidgeting. She might be feeling tense. And of course, when she's feeling tense, that would then make her feel more stressed and anxious and frustrated. And of course, because she's thinking she's only got 5 hours now, she's then engaging in behaviors such as clock watching, tossing and turning, and all the time making herself more worried. And so, for the next part of the workshop, what we will be looking at are some techniques which actually focus on each area of that cycle. So we're going to be looking at some techniques that help with the racing mind, and then some techniques which we call progressive muscle relaxation techniques to help reduce some of those physical symptoms. And then lastly, we will be looking at sleep hygiene, which helps us to address some of those unhelpful behaviors.
So we're going to start.
Pass back to you, Amy.
Thank you, Tunde. We're going to start with having to think about sleep hygiene then. So sleep hygiene is the term used to describe sleeping habits, particularly good sleeping habits. So sleep hygiene encourages us to think about our behaviours and the things that we're doing, maybe before we go to sleep or after. We think about all those different areas. Quite often there might be changes that we could make in some of those behaviours. Some of those behaviours might be unhelpful for us. So yeah, I hope that this section will help us to think about our behaviours and some of the sleep hygiene techniques. I guess the likelihood is that some of these techniques and some of this advice might be more useful to you than other bits. There might be bits that you've tried before. But yeah, we just encourage you to think about implementing at least a few of these, have a think about if any of them apply for you. So a really important one, which is probably quite underrated, is about sleeping at regular times. So getting up and going to bed at the same time is proven to help improve our sleep. So having a set time that we go to bed and having a set getting up time, that can be quite hard because maybe we want to change that at weekends, or it's kind of maybe difficult to stick with a routine. But the more of a routine that we can have, the better our sleep will be. Creating a bedtime routine by including a wind down period is also really helpful. So it says about 30 minutes to 1 hour before your bedtime, start winding down, and that might involve doing some relaxation techniques or doing something you find relaxing, cutting out screen time, reading a book, something to help you to kind of wind down and and calm your mind before going to bed. Another important one is about keeping your room cool and comfortable. So too much light causes wakefulness. So keeping our room dark and cool can be helpful. Some people might find it helpful to keep their room quiet as well. Some people might prefer to have like almost like a white noise or a sound going on while they sleep. There's lots of different apps that will play like rain sounds and things like that. So yes, and consider the noise in your room, consider the temperature of your room, consider are your sheets comfortable, is your pillow comfortable, do they need changing? Your mattress as well. Think about all of those different things. Avoiding alcohol, coffee, tea, cola, chocolate, anything with caffeine is also really important as well. We know that caffeine, it really affects people differently. For some people that has a really massive effect on them, and for others maybe not so much. But just notice if you're having any of these things at least 6 hours before your bedtime, and if you are, it might be worth reducing them or completely cutting them out and seeing if that makes a difference for you. Also exercising regularly. We know that regular exercise is really important and it can help contribute to better sleep. It says it might not be immediate, but it can help improve sleep overall, which we know is true. Only using your bed for sleep and sex. So this is about strengthening our sleep to bed connection. So it's important that our brain recognizes that when we are going to get into bed, that is part of our sleep routine, and that is our body recognizing that this is bedtime and I'm going to sleep now. So I guess it's about thinking about trying to avoid laying in bed watching TV or browsing the internet or looking at your phone before bed, or like using your bed to eat dinner in, or do like other activities maybe which aren't necessarily about sleeping or winding down. If we can strengthen our mind to bed connection, that can really help. Also, no naps. This might be a difficult one, but if we're feeling like we want to nap, it's best to try to resist that urge to nap during the day. So they might help relieve tiredness in the short term, but if we're experiencing trouble falling asleep and it's something that we do repetitively, it's nap, then in the long run, it's really not helpful for us. And again, avoid clock watching. So try to avoid checking your phone or clock during the night, particularly checking your phone, I guess, because that can be really distracting. You might get distracted with looking at other things too. And it also might trigger some of these thoughts around, oh, is that the time? I need to get up soon. So it kind of avoids us getting caught up in maybe that spiral of worrying. So I hope that there's maybe some things there that you can have a think about and just take a moment to consider, is there anything that we've spoken about here that might apply to you, or anything you could think about making a change to? And Yetunde is going to go on to talk a little bit more about managing more of those physical symptoms.
Thank you, Amy. So now we're looking at the next area of the cycle where we would like to make some changes, and that is in our physical body. One of the things that you might remember that we showed on that cycle that accompanies sleep difficulties is tension, and muscle tension is commonly associated with stress and anxiety, and that can make it more difficult to relax. And given the busy lives that many of us live, that is actually even harder to do. However, we do know that PMR, which I would now be calling progressive muscle relaxation, is a very powerful tool, and it can help anyone, both in terms of its relaxing effect, but also it can help promote a better sleep, and it can help also reduce muscle tension. And one of the things which I need to say before I begin to take us through the exercise itself is that it's important to be very careful when you're practicing tensing your muscles. You should never feel intense or shooting pain when you're completing this exercise that I'll be taking us through. However, do try and make the muscle tension deliberate but gentle. If you have any problems with your muscles being pulled or broken bones or any medical issues or physical injuries, then do speak to your doctor about this first and foremost. And the other thing to say is that it can take time actually before you begin to notice a difference between tension and relaxation. At first, you might find yourself being uncomfortable focusing on your body, but this can become helpful over time. And the more we practice PMR, the more able we would be to use that technique when we most need it. So perhaps we should have a try together. And maybe what I'd like to say is, if necessary, pause the video for now if you need to. Try and think about what you're wearing and if that is comfortable. And are you also seated in a comfortable place? And is your surrounding also comfortable, not much distraction or light? So if you need to pause and set it all up before we continue the practice, then that will be fine. So let's now practice together. The first thing I would like for you to do is to just notice your breathing, slow it down, and give yourself permission to relax. And when you're ready to begin, I'd like for you to tense the muscle group that I am going to describe. Do so in such a way that you can feel the tension, but without feeling the pain. And keep that muscle tense for about 5 seconds, and then slowly relax. And you might want to mentally be saying to yourself or under your breath the word relax. And when you finish the relaxation procedure, allow yourself to just become alert for a moment. So I will be taking us through some of these sequences right now. Ready? So the first thing that we'll be doing is our right hand. Make a fist with your right hand. Feel the tension perhaps in your knuckles and in your wrist for 5 seconds, and slowly relax, feeling the tension dissipate. On that same hand, I now want you to go to your right upper arm. Bring your right upper arm up to your shoulder to form a muzzle. Feel that tension in your muzzle for about 5 seconds, and then slowly relax. Let's move now to our left hand, clenching that fist for 5 seconds, holding it, and then slowly relax. Then move again to the left forearm, feel that muscle, and then slowly relax. Let's now go to our forehead. Raise your eyebrows as high as you can, as if somebody had startled you. Feel the tension in your brow. Hold it, and then slowly relax. Let's move to our mouth and jaw. Open your mouth as wide as you can, as if you are yawning. Feel the tension in your jaws, perhaps, and in your cheeks, and then slowly relax. Let's now go on to our shoulders. Tense the muscles in your shoulders as high as you can by bringing your shoulders up towards your ears. Hold it in that position for a few seconds. Feel the tension there, and then slowly relax. And this next one, if it's easier, you can stand up to do it, or you can remain seated in your chair, is your shoulders. Tense the muscles in your shoulders by pushing your shoulder blades back, almost as if you were trying to get them to touch each other, and your chest is pointing outwards. Feel the tension, and then slowly relax. And then the last thing that I would like us to do is our chest and stomach. And I'd like you to breathe in deeply. Hold that breath. And then breathe out. Slowly relax. Take some time now to just stay seated for a few moments. One of the things which I normally would have asked you to do if we were together, and it's good for you to do this when you're doing this on your own. Before you even start, notice how relaxed you were on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 meaning not relaxed at all, and 10 meaning feeling very relaxed. And then when you've ended it, like we're doing now, notice how relaxed you are. Is there any difference between how you felt before and how you feel now? There are other body muscles that you need to go through, but there would be some resources at the end of this workshop that you can refer to that will take you through the rest of the muscle groups. And just to iterate, that it's only through practice that you can become more aware of this. And the more you train and practice this on a regular basis, the more you will find it easier to do, and the more relaxed you will feel at the end of it. Thank you. And
thank you, Kiko.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
We're going to move on to thinking a little bit more about thoughts then. So going back to that cycle, Yutunde's had to think about the more physical feelings, and we spoke a bit about behaviours in terms of sleep hygiene and things that we might change in our activities. But now we're going to have a think about our thoughts, and particularly around managing the racing mind. Because we know that this is something that can often be a problem for us, kind of laying in bed awake, and we notice that we're thinking about a lot of different things, or our mind is racing. I guess that's the time where we don't have any distractions, so those thoughts pop up, and then it's hard to get rid of them or to move on from them. So common things that we might be thinking about, we have a few different kind of themes here. So we've got problem solving, thinking about sleeping, listening to our body, thinking about thinking. So for example, here with like problem solving, we might be thinking, you know, how do I go about tackling this problem? What if I did this? What if I did that? It might also involve some kind of rehearsing and planning, thinking about the future, what I need to do tomorrow, what I need to organise, those types of thoughts. Thinking about sleeping, those thoughts might be like, yeah, what if I can't sleep? Or I'm going to feel really bad tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to cope tomorrow because I haven't slept, and already predicting that things might be difficult. And then listening to our body, so noticing pains or discomfort and focusing on them, wondering, is that normal? Do I always feel like that? Does that feel different? I guess we become almost like hyper aware, hypersensitive to those things when we're listening to our body and focusing on it. And then thinking about thinking, so what can I do to stop this thinking? Am I the only person that does this? Am I the only person that's always worrying or thinking about these things at night? If I could stop thinking, then maybe I could fall asleep. I guess it's a bit of a vicious catch-22, isn't it? A vicious cycle. We mention these themes because I think it's really important for us to notice if any of these are happening for us. The first step in doing anything about it is noticing and recognizing that maybe it's not helpful. So just see if you can catch yourself doing any of these things, and just even making a point of saying to yourself, I know this isn't very helpful. I can see what I'm doing here. This is problem solving. Even just kind of identifying those thoughts and recognizing them can be helpful. Another idea is around putting the day to rest. So setting aside some time in the early evening before going to bed where we can dedicate that time to writing down some of our thoughts. So it recommends 20 minutes. I'd say like 15-20 minutes is a good amount of time. You don't want to be spending ages on it, but just have a think about your day, write a to-do list. Is there things that you need to get done, things that you should have done today that you didn't do, things that might be on your mind. Sometimes even just the act of getting it out of our heads and onto paper can be really therapeutic and cathartic. Just writing it down can really help. It makes us feel more in control. And also, I guess, once it's down on a piece of paper, we don't necessarily have to hold on to it. It almost gives us permission to stop thinking about it because we've written it down. So we're not going to forget. We don't have to hold it in our head thinking that it's something that we're going to forget about if we stop thinking about it, because we've got it written down. So it doesn't matter if we stop thinking about it. It might be handy to have a paper and pen beside your bed to jot things down. It's not a case of having to do anything about it right there and then. Reminding yourself that you have got time to deal with these things. These are things that you don't have to do immediately. A lot of the things that we might be worrying about, thinking about, maybe we don't need to action them straight away. It's something that we can do later on in the future. So yeah, I'd say give this a go. I think it sounds really simple, but it can be really helpful for lots of different reasons. And if you find that writing it down on a pen and paper doesn't work for you, maybe try a laptop or your phone, or just practice different ways in which you might find it helpful for you. But just be careful if you're doing it on your phone. Don't get distracted by other things. Another great tip is this idea of giving up trying. So often the thing which is holding us and keeping us awake is this idea that we're clinging on to the fact that we're not asleep yet. So we're consciously thinking about how we're not sleeping and how that's a problem for us. But actually, if we just give up trying, then that is where we can allow sleep to creep in and to take over us. So here's some steps to try this yourself. So lie in bed with the lights off, but keep your eyes open. So you might find yourself laying in bed doing that anyway. You're laying there awake and you're not asleep. But try giving up any effort to fall asleep. Give up any concern about being awake. It doesn't matter. It's okay. When you feel like your eyelids are going to close, just stay awake for a couple more minutes. So the idea is not to force yourself to stay awake. The idea is to just notice. I guess there's a big difference between like when we're actually like tired and we're sleepy tired. So just wait for your eyelids to feel heavy and you can close your eyes, and whatever happens, happens. I guess it's about letting go of that control over our sleep. Telling ourselves in our mind to fall asleep isn't going to help us to fall asleep. And worrying about it and thinking about it isn't helpful. It's only keeping us awake. So yeah, this idea of giving up trying can actually be really helpful. And it's about, giving up the effort and the concern and the judgment around not sleeping and just letting yourself be okay with it. I'd encourage you to give it a go if you haven't tried it before. Yetunde is going to talk to us a little bit about the 15-minute rule.
Okay, thank you, Amy. This is one of those exercises that we particularly recommend to kind of help us to strengthen that connection between being in our bed and sleeping. So what we will be suggesting is that when you want to say you've done your sleep routine, you're now actually in bed, you've turned the light off because remember we know that we like that if the lights are bright, that would prevent you from falling asleep quickly. And so you're now trying to sleep. If you're not asleep within 15 minutes, then get up. That's the 15-minute rule. Go to another room that you've already prepared in advance just for this particular event. And that other room needs to be as non-stimulating as possible too. Not bright lights, good temperature. Have something there that you can do that you might find relaxing and not stimulating, because obviously you're not wanting to increase the arousal, you want to decrease that. And this will be different for everyone. So for some people, it could be knitting or doing a jigsaw puzzle or listening to some very soft music. But the key thing is to sit quietly and to not have racing thoughts as much as possible. Just focus on what it is that you are doing, trying to relax. This might even be a good time to practice some of those PMR techniques that we mentioned earlier on. And then don't return to your bedroom until you feel like you could fall asleep. And you might need to do this repeatedly throughout the night. We do know that this is something that can be difficult to do because often we remember that cycle. Often, we're tossing and turning, trying harder to sleep. But this one is one whereby you're actually giving up trying in that moment, leaving your bed, going to another room, and not going back onto to your bed until you're feeling sleepy, just so that you can strengthen that bed to sleep connection. And do try it. We do know it can be hard, but for many people who persisted with this particular technique, they have reported that it does really help. And the other thing, like Amy mentioned earlier on, is to try not to nap during the day so that your bodies will be ready, hopefully, to sleep. So that's the 15-minute rule. And then another thing that is also helpful, perhaps, is to have a sleep diary. And I'd like to say at this point that this is not a tool to be used to punish yourself as to I'm not getting enough sleep or I'm sleeping at awkward times, because those are just thoughts that will keep that negative cycle going. Rather, it's meant to be a helpful exercise. You're just recording what's happening without judging yourself, okay? And it can be helpful to notice what time you sleep, how long you sleep for, and hopefully through keeping a sleep diary, certain patterns might begin to emerge within your sleeping habits. You may notice that there are days of the week, for instance, when it's more difficult for you to sleep, perhaps after you've been out partying with friends, or maybe you've had a stressful day at work. But these particular patterns will begin to emerge as you keep the sleep diary. And you could either record this on a notebook or on your phone. And I know that there is a handout as well that we would be including with this that also can give you that can give you a template. And we particularly will encourage you, if you are having sleep difficulties, to try this, because often people are very surprised that their routine is actually different from what they thought. And by keeping a sleep diary, they are able to notice some different patterns. And there's some nicer links on our website as well that can tell you more about this. And so I guess bringing all of this together, you would notice that all along what Amy and I have been talking about involves making changes either to our sleep routine, changes to our thought patterns, changes to lifestyle, such as, when we drink coffee, at what time of the day, and so on. And we acknowledge that change can be difficult. And what are some of the things that you think you could do in order to make change easier for you? And this might be the time for you to perhaps, if you've got a notepad there with you, to perhaps jot down some of those things. I.e., there's an example there for you, replacing the thought, I'm never going to get a good night's sleep, with, it can be difficult to break these habits, but I'm going to keep on trying. And like any skill, it does take time. If you're learning to play the guitar or the piano or learning to sew, it's going to be quite a while for you before you get going. But with practice, you find out that yes, I can learn the guitar. It's the same thing with sleep. This is not. We're not promising that there are going to be instant results. It's not the day you plant a seed in the ground that it germinates into this beautiful flower. It does take time before you can eat the fruit. It's the same thing with these skills we are asking you to practice. But practice makes perfect. And eventually, if you don't give up, you would notice the difference. So if you can move the slide then, Amy, to a sleep plan. I'd like for you to pause the video at this point if you don't actually have something that you can write with, and then come back to it once you've got a piece of paper or you want to record it on your phone. But this is a commitment that you're making with yourself, because we know that having a plan really helps us to embed lasting change. And your sleep plan could look like this. So before I go to bed, this is what I'm going to do in relation to my sleep routine. At bedtime, I'll do X, Y, and Z. If I wake up in the night, this is what I'm going to do. And if I'm struggling, I will say X to myself. So for instance, your sleep plan could be, before I go to bed, I will switch off my mobile phone an hour before bedtime. And I will also not watch TV. So that could be what goes into, your sleep plan. At bedtime, I will spend 15 minutes practicing PMR. That could be something that you have. If I wake up in the night, I will give myself up to 15 minutes to stay in bed. But if that is not working, I will then get up and I will go into another part of the house. And of course, we recognize that for some of you, that may be difficult, but it could even be I will go to another part of my room and sit in the chair there rather than lie in my bed. And also in terms of my thoughts, so your plan would be, if I'm struggling, I will say to myself, this will take some time, but with practice, it will get better. So those are some of the things that you might be saying to yourself. And, one thing about what should we recommend when people are putting things into their plan is to start small. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So do think carefully about something that you think you really can do, and don't start with stuff that is very, very difficult, like I'm going to cut out alcohol altogether, absolutely, and have a 10 list of things which I wouldn't do. You might find that that's not possible. So start small and then begin to build it up gradually. So just bringing all of this together, Amy, if you move us to the next slide, let's just summarize about the tools that we've explored. So if we go back to the aims of our workshop at the beginning, we wanted to bust some common myths about sleep through the sleep exercise that we did. We wanted to learn about sleep stages and to think about sleep problems and learn strategies to help improve our sleep and to make a plan. So all the tools that we've looked at and that we've explored are the sleep hygiene tools, the PMR, 15-minute rule, putting the day to rest, and then, having a sleep diary and a sleep plan. So perhaps before we finish, this might be a good time for you to reflect. What are you taking away from the workshop today? Just one thing that you could begin to change even now. And is there anything that you can start practicing? And really, this is just an important part of this workshop, to just really think about it. And remember, it could be just one small thing, not drinking tea and coffee 6 hours before bedtime. That could just be the one thing that you have, okay? But for yourself, just pause, answer these questions, and write them down. Particularly think of something that you'd like to start practicing even now, perhaps from today. And then lastly, we'd just like to end the workshop by giving you a list of all the resources that may be available to you, that you can go and look at to help embed some of the learning, but also to kind of do some further research. So there is a copy of all of those links. But if you would like further support, perhaps you've tried this for yourself for some time and it's not working, you can speak to your GP for a referral to iCope, or you can consider a self-referral via our website if you're not already being supported. So thank you very much